Imagine you are a kid in a huge castle. You have a giant, fancy dollhouse that's worth more than $1 billion. Now, imagine that your dad's new wife and her whole family have been treating that dollhouse like their own personal toy box. They've been giving out the best jobs to their friends and family without even asking anyone else if they wanted a turn. Then, one day, you turn 18. You become the official owner of that dollhouse. And on that very first day, you walk in and say, "Everyone who got a job just because they know my stepmom, you're all fired. Go home." No big speeches, no warning, just a quiet change that sends a shockwave through the whole kingdom. That's exactly what happened when Prince William became the Duke of Cornwall. He didn't yell or make a scene. He just quietly took control and sent a message so loud that it echoed through every single palace in the country. And now, he's getting ready to do something even bigger, something that has his stepmother, Queen Camilla, so worried that she doesn't even know where she's going to live. The beautiful homes she walks through every single day, she doesn't own a single brick of them. The man who does own them just proved he's not the kind of guy who forgets the past. So let's rewind to the very beginning of this story. It all started on a sad day, September 8th, 2022. That was the day that Queen Elizabeth II, the beloved grandmother of the nation, passed away at Balmoral Castle. In that very same moment, before the whole world even had time to be sad, a chain reaction started inside the royal family. It was like a row of dominoes, and it's still affecting everyone today. The most obvious change was that Charles became king. Everyone knew that was going to happen. But something else happened at the exact same time, something that most people didn't even notice at first, but it turned out to be a huge deal. William, who was 40 years old then, automatically became the Duke of Cornwall. It's a rule that's been around for hundreds of years. The second his dad became king, William became the sole owner of one of the oldest and most powerful private estates on the entire planet. Now, this isn't just a fancy title or a little patch of land. We are talking about a massive fortune. The Duchy of Cornwall is worth about $1.2 billion. That's a 1, followed by a whole lot of zeros. It covers 135,000 acres, which is a giant chunk of land spread across 23 counties in England and Wales. It includes almost the entire Isles of Scilly, which are these gorgeous, dreamy islands off the coast of Cornwall. It also includes half of Dartmoor in Devon, ancient farms that have been around for centuries, historic castles, rental properties, cute holiday cottages, and decades of smart financial investments. This estate wasn't just made up yesterday. It was created way back in 1337 by King Edward III. He made it especially for his son, who became the very first Duke of Cornwall. The rule was simple and has never changed. The estate belongs to the monarch's oldest son, who is the heir to the throne. So, after nearly 700 years of history, all of this now belonged to William. By 2025, William was making about $30 million a year just from this one estate. He even pays taxes on it voluntarily, because the law doesn't even make him. That's the kind of money and independence we're talking about. He doesn't need anyone's permission for anything. But here's where the story gets a lot more serious. This is the part that most people completely missed. The Duchy of Cornwall was the exact same estate that had been paying for Charles's whole life for decades. While Charles was the Duke, this estate paid for his lifestyle, his fancy houses, and all his projects. And during those years, Charles was also having an affair with Camilla. This was the affair that completely broke his marriage to Princess Diana. Diana, who was adored by the whole world, felt like she was losing her husband to another woman. She even said it felt like there were three people in her marriage, but most people never saw what it did to her when the cameras were off. It destroyed her confidence from the inside. According to people who worked for her, she would pull them aside with fear in her eyes and ask them quietly, "Am I beautiful enough?" When they would say yes, she would shake her head and whisper, "Don't lie to the princess." It was heartbreaking. A woman the whole world called beautiful couldn't see it in herself anymore, because the man she married had made her feel like she was invisible. There were even nights when the palace staff would hear muffled crying coming from her room at 3 in the morning. She often slept in a separate room from Charles, alone in one of the grandest buildings in the world, feeling completely hollow inside. The affair that William and Harry watched destroy their mother from the time they were little boys was funded by this very estate. And now, that estate belonged to Diana's son. There's one more super important detail that almost nobody talked about. The Duchy of Cornwall was designed by King Edward specifically so that the heirs could never be controlled by the king. William owning it meant he was totally financially independent of his own father. He didn't need Charles for anything. And this had some very real modern-day consequences for Camilla's family. Because inside that estate, getting a royal paycheck for almost 20 years, was a woman named Annabel Elliot. She is Queen Camilla's younger sister. She was hired back in 2005 to design the interiors of duchy properties across Cornwall, Wales, and the Isles of Scilly. And get this, she was hired without any competition. She didn't have to interview or beat out other designers. She got the contract because her sister was married to the man who owned the estate. That was the whole reason. For 20 years, it worked out perfectly for her. Until the very day William became her boss. What happened next sent a shockwave through Camilla's whole family. It was like a thunderclap. But before we get to that, you really need to understand exactly who Camilla is and what she's been doing inside this family for the past 20 years. Because William's actions didn't just come out of nowhere. They were a response to something. And that something is much darker than most people realize. For a long time, before William had the power to do anything, he was just watching. And what he was watching would have broken a lesser man. It all started with a promise. Before Charles married Camilla in April 2005, William and Harry went to their father in private. They made one quiet, specific request. Harry later wrote about this conversation in his book, Spare. He wrote that they told their dad, "We support you. We endorse Camilla. We will welcome her into the family. Just please don't marry her, just be together." The boys knew that a wedding would drag their mother's name back through every newspaper in the world. It would force the whole country to compare Diana to the woman who had been her husband's mistress throughout their marriage. Neither of them wanted that. Charles listened to both of his sons, and then he went ahead and married her anyway. To try and calm down the public, Buckingham Palace made a specific announcement. They said that when Charles eventually became king, Camilla would be known as Princess Consort. She would never be queen, that was the deal. William accepted it. He went to the wedding, shook hands, smiled for the cameras, and carried the weight of what it all meant deep down in a private place where nobody could see. Then, in February 2022, something happened that many people didn't fully understand at the time. Queen Elizabeth released a message to mark her 70 years on the throne. It was supposed to be a moment of reflection and legacy, but buried inside that message was a decision that would change everything. She said it was her sincere wish that Camilla be known as Queen Consort when Charles became king. At first, people thought it was an act of acceptance, maybe even forgiveness. But people who were close to the Queen told a very different story. This wasn't about love or approval, this was fear. By that point, the Queen was dying. Her health was failing fast, and she knew it. She could see what was coming. The crown would soon pass to Charles, and with it, a storm that she wouldn't be there to control. One insider put it bluntly. They said she wasn't blessing Camilla. She was trying to contain something. In private, the Queen had used words that never reached the public. She had described Camilla as dangerous. She had watched for years. She had seen how far things could go. And in her final years, she made a decision that felt less like approval and more like giving up. She gave Camilla what she wanted, not because she believed in her, but because she feared what might happen if she didn't. It was the act of a woman trying to put out a fire she knew she wouldn't live long enough to fight. Then came May 2023, the coronation, and something else quietly changed. The word consort started to disappear. Soon it was just gone. Camilla was no longer queen consort. She was simply queen, the exact title she had always wanted, the one that both princes had once made clear should never happen. And yet there it was, official and complete. One source later said what many had suspected all along: she was never going to settle for anything less. William had watched every version of the original promise get rewritten, and he said nothing. But the resentment was described by sources as deep and carefully hidden. One source put it plainly: William is more diplomatic than Harry, so he has tried to disguise his resentment. The way Camilla betrayed his mother has not been forgotten. And there was so much more to resent than just the title. Camilla didn't just wait for her position to grow. She worked for it, and she had a very specific way of working. When she wanted Charles to see William or Harry in a negative light, she would go to him privately and whisper her version of events into his ear. She shaped what Charles thought about his own sons, slowly and quietly from the inside. A royal biographer confirmed that Camilla was known to do exactly this. She would feed Charles her assessments of William and Harry's shortcomings when nobody else was in the room. But that was only one side of her operation. The other side was the press. Camilla had built relationships with key British journalists, and her team used those relationships as weapons. When she needed to look good, stories would appear. When she needed someone else to look bad, those stories would appear too. For example, her team planted the false story that Meghan had made Kate cry in the days before the 2018 royal wedding. That story tore through the British press and caused real damage inside the family. Everyone in the palace knew it was a lie. Charles's team refused to correct it. William and Harry went directly to their father and told him what his communications team was doing. Charles shouted at them and told William he was being paranoid. Camilla had built a system where every door they tried to open led back to her. William was not paranoid. He was watching clearly. He was storing every single thing away in his memory and waiting for the day he had the power to answer it. The arrangement with Annabel was built from the exact same blueprint. Camilla's sister was handed a lucrative royal contract without ever having to compete for it, and she held it for 20 years. But what made it almost unbearable was the secret detail beneath the surface. Because long before the contract, there was something else, something hidden. Back when King Charles was still married to Princess Diana, the affair with Camilla had to be kept a secret. And there was one place where that happened. A quiet country house in Dorset. It was Annabel's house. It was in a private, isolated village safe from prying eyes. That was where they would meet weekend after weekend. Annabel gave them the space, the cover, the protection, and that's what makes what came next so difficult to ignore. Years later, after everything had come out, after the damage was done, after Diana was gone, Annabel was now being paid because of the job Camilla gave her. Paid through the estate tied to Diana's legacy. Paid from the estate connected to William. When William finally had the power to act, the question was never whether he would. The question was only how. The moment William became Duke of Cornwall, he knew exactly what he was going to do about Annabel Elliot. He would fire her. He didn't call a meeting. He didn't send a letter. He didn't make a single public statement. He simply waited for the Duchy of Cornwall to publish its routine annual financial accounts. It's a document that almost nobody outside royal financial circles ever reads. It's a boring, technical record of income, expenses, and staffing across the estate. But this time, something was different. Annabel Elliot's name was gone. 20 years of royal employment ended without a single public word. To understand how much that removal actually meant, you need to understand how much Annabel had built during those 2 decades. And then you will understand exactly how much William just took away. Annabel was genuinely talented and widely respected. In 2014, she was named the fifth most influential female interior designer in the United Kingdom. She had designed the interiors of 12 holiday cottages on the Isles of Scilly. She had worked on properties at Restormel Castle. She had transformed the LL Wynwermod estate in Wales. She had taken a rundown barn at Dumfries House in Scotland and converted it into a lavish guest house used for weddings and private events. For nearly 20 years, her work was threaded through some of the most beautiful properties in the entire royal collection. None of that saved her. A royal expert explained the situation with very careful language, the kind of language people use when they are trying not to say something too directly. She said that since Prince William had taken over as Duke of Cornwall, he had taken Annabel off the payroll, and that this had caused a few ripples in the headlines. The official statement from sources was equally careful. They said the decision was no reflection on her work. It wasn't about her work. Everyone knew that. A separate royal source was considerably less careful. This source said William's move sent a message, and that he wanted to cut away the royal hangers-on and reduce the lavish spending his father had built up. Cut away the royal hangers-on. That is the phrase that matters. That is what William thought of the arrangement that his father had created for his wife's family. At the same time as Annabel disappeared from the payroll, William was filling the duchy with people he had chosen himself. He brought in his own personal friends, who are also godparents to his children, Prince George and Prince Louis. The message didn't need any explanation. Out went Camilla's family. In came William's people. Every position Charles had filled with someone from his world was now being reviewed. Every arrangement built around Camilla's comfort was being examined. On the surface, the financial cost was modest. Annabel had been paid anywhere between about £20,000 and £82,000 per year. Against a $1.2 billion estate, those numbers are almost nothing. But the symbolism was enormous, and everyone inside the royal family felt it. It told Camilla that her family's access to the crown was not permanent. It told the royal household that the transition from Charles's era to William's had already quietly begun. And this was not the only shot William fired. Every year at Christmas, the royal family gathers at Sandringham. It is one of the most important family traditions in the monarchy. Sandringham is where generations of royals have spent the holiday together. William will one day inherit it. Camilla decided to invite her son, Tom Parker Bowles, her child from her first marriage, to the family Christmas there. Reports came out that a furious William had made his position clear. He would not attend the main Christmas lunch if Tom was present. Camilla invited Tom anyway. Tom confirmed to the Telegraph that his mother had personally asked him to come, telling him she had not had Christmas with him in a long time. Tom came, and William did not attend the main gathering at the big house. He stayed with Kate and their children at Anmer Hall, their home on the Sandringham estate, and spent Christmas there instead. Camilla had just forced the future King of England out of his own family Christmas at an estate he will one day own because she invited her son and refused to back down. That's not a small family disagreement. That's a power struggle playing out over seating arrangements and turkey lunch. Then in September 2025, something happened publicly that made the tension impossible to ignore. During Donald Trump's state visit to Windsor Castle, Kate fell into easy and natural conversation with Melania Trump. The two women connected warmly. Then, from the side, Camilla stepped in. What happened next lasted only a second, but it changed the entire tone of the moment. Camilla raised her hand and made a short, firm motion toward Kate. It was a signal and it said, "Move, step aside, leave." It wasn't verbal, but it was unmistakable. A body language expert later described it bluntly. It looked like she was pulling rank, almost shooing her away. The clip spread everywhere. Millions watched it, slowed it down, and replayed it because what it showed was uncomfortable. The queen appeared to be dismissing the future queen in public in front of world leaders. Behind the scenes, the reaction was immediate. Prince William had spent years keeping things calm, but this was different. One source said it hit him hard. That wasn't just awkward. That crossed the line because this wasn't a private disagreement anymore. It was a public message, and it had just been sent to the entire world. By that point, something even more unsettling was already happening behind closed doors. King Charles, still battling cancer, had started having quiet conversations with his son about what would happen after he was gone. One insider described the tone as urgent and personal. "Leave Camilla alone." That was the message from Charles to his son. Protect her. Don't turn against her. Don't push her out. It was a dying king spending what could be his final years trying to secure his wife's future by appealing directly to the one person who could take it away. That single detail tells you more about where this is heading than anything else. Because William's answer was not given in words. It was given in a Christmas he did not attend. It was given in the friends he hired to replace the woman his father's wife had employed. But the firing of Annabel Elliot and the Christmas standoff were only what people could see. The move that Camilla understood at the deepest level, the one that would define the rest of her life, had nothing to do with a payroll and everything to do with four walls and a roof. Because William had not just inherited an estate, he had inherited the homes she called her own. And the day was coming when she would have to ask him whether she could stay. Right now, Queen Camilla's life looks completely secure. She moves between Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, Sandringham, and Balmoral. She has official royal duties. She has the full support and protection of her husband, the king. She holds the title Her Majesty the Queen. She is the patron or president of more than 90 charities. From the outside, her position looks solid and permanent. But every single thing she has is tied to one man, and that man has cancer. Here is something that most people do not fully understand, and it is the most important thing in this entire story. Sandringham House in Norfolk and Balmoral Castle in Scotland are not owned by the British government. They are not crown properties managed by an institution. They are privately owned the same way a family home is privately owned. Queen Elizabeth inherited both of them from her father, King George VI. When Elizabeth died in September 2022, they passed directly to Charles. When Charles dies, they will pass directly to William. Balmoral is worth about $140 million. Sandringham is worth about $65 million. Together, that is over $200 million in private property that Camilla currently walks through, sleeps in, and calls home. None of it belongs to her. Not in any legal sense, not in any document that exists anywhere. One day, these homes will belong to William, the man who just removed her sister from his payroll without a single public word. Balmoral in particular carries a weight that goes far beyond its financial value. William was 15 years old and staying at Balmoral with his brother Harry in August 1997 when their father came to their rooms before dawn to tell them their mother was dead. Diana had been killed in a car crash in Paris. William and Harry walked those grounds that morning, completely destroyed. Two boys trying to survive something no child should ever have to survive. And the detail that sits underneath all of this like a stone is that when Charles received the news from Paris, the first person he called was not the Queen, who was also at Balmoral. The first person he called was Camilla. She reassured him Diana would be fine. Then he called back with the news that she was gone. Camilla was the first to know. She was there for Charles's grief before his own sons were even awake. Camilla now walks those same grounds as Queen. William will own them. One day, when Charles dies, the legal transfer is instant and automatic, exactly as it was in 2022 when William became Duke of Cornwall. William becomes King II, his father is gone. Kate becomes Queen, and Camilla loses the title, the Queen, entirely. It passes to Kate. Camilla would most likely become Queen Dowager, which means the widow of a king. It is not a shameful designation, but it is a step back that the entire world will notice. Here is the part that makes it genuinely frightening for Camilla. Her title is not protected by birth. She is royal by marriage only. That means it will be entirely up to William to decide what she is called after Charles is gone. Charles stripped Diana of her title, Her Royal Highness, after their divorce. William was there for that. He watched it happen to his mother. He knows exactly how the mechanism works. And now, he could get a sort of revenge for his mother. He could take back everything Camilla took from his mother. Sandringham and Balmoral will belong to William. Whether Camilla can continue living in those homes will depend entirely on what William decides. There is no legal protection that guarantees her access. She will be a guest if he extends that courtesy. And here is the detail that makes her situation almost impossible to escape. Camilla had one piece of property in her life that was completely and only hers. It was called Ray Mill House, a private home in Wiltshire that she had owned before she ever married Charles. She used to talk about it with real warmth. She called the garden there the best therapy in the world. It was her retreat, her private ground, the one place where she could close the door and simply be herself, away from the weight of royal life. But then she sold it. She sold the only home that was truly hers. The reasons given were that she wanted to commit fully to her royal life and her role beside Charles. But the consequence of that decision is devastating and irreversible. When Charles dies, Camilla will have no private property of her own anywhere. She will live wherever William decides she should live. The woman who spent 20 years engineering her way to the top of the most powerful family in Britain, who managed the press, who whispered in Charles's ear, who planted stories, who pushed the future king out from Christmas, who dismissed the future queen with a wave of her hand in front of the entire world, will now entirely depend on the goodwill of the man she helped push out of his own family home. She built the trap herself. She walked right into it with her eyes wide open.